Hello and welcome to Radio Free America. I'm your host, Rusty Shackleford, and today I wasn't intending to broadcast today. So today is a special message, and the reason I wanted to put it out today is because I kind of want to put myself on record as having said this, because I can see this fairly clearly, and I think it's entirely a possibility, and so I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm just saying there's a good chance it could, and any clear-thinking person should at least recognize that it's a possibility and do what they can to prepare for it. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about hyperinflation. I'm talking about bursting of a bubble. I'm talking about economic collapse. I'm talking about all the things that really nobody wants to believe can happen. And living in this country, especially as a patriotic American, you think that it really can't happen to us, that somehow we're unique and we're special, which we are. But what the powers that be have been doing to us for the last, especially 15 years, but really going back to Bretton Woods in 1971, and even before that, with the Great New Deal and starting all these social safety nets like Social Security and unemployment benefits and so forth, we've been building an ever-increasing welfare state over time that has become dependent on taxpayer dollars of people that are working to pay people to not work one way or the other. And Social Security is an example. You know, over the course of your career, you might, let's just use a number, if you started working in 1950 and you retired in 1985, you may have paid a total of $40,000 into Social Security. But now over the course of the rest of your life until you die, you now have collected $300,000 in Social Security. These are just numbers. They're not accurate by any means, but I'm using it to illustrate the point that it doesn't make sense that you're paying someone, and that's the nature of inflation. The nature of inflation is that tomorrow's dollar will always be less than today's dollar, for the most part. That's what inflation means. It becomes worth less. So you need more and more and more of them to equal what it once was. Which brings me to this. The reason I'm broadcasting today is I had an interesting conversation with a friend. And real estate is very strange right now. There are some reports that real estate is now kind of picking up and accelerating. And it makes sense in a lot of ways if you think about it, in the same way that the stock market has gone up, back up to about where it was before the coronavirus. It makes sense because the money that was printed up in the last several months, it was basically injected into into banks. It all went to banks. So what do the banks do with it? Well, the banks put it in the stock market and they hand out loans. So it makes perfect sense that these two sectors would be experiencing growth at a time that doesn't really make much sense to anyone who's paying attention, right? If we have 25, 30 million people file for unemployment, and we know from our own experience that things aren't open. Almost nothing is open. So at least as far as Main Street goes, nothing's getting sold. I have to go to Walmart if I want a pair of sandals. I might normally go to my local surf shop, but now I have no choice. So you can see that companies that are traded on these exchanges and the money that flows into it from these banks that the federal government prints up, essentially, it doesn't immediately flood its way onto Main Street, but it does flood its way into the banks. And investors will take up cheap money anytime they can find it. If I can buy a house with a 1.5% mortgage rate, as an investor, that's very attractive when I know that I can get, a 7 or 8% return a year on an appreciation, or at least I speculate that. But in the meanwhile, I have rents cover it. So it's not at all a surprise to me to see these two markets go up. And if it doesn't make sense for everything that you see around you, hold on, because it will. Because this is always how these things unfold. And I'm going to tell you how I see it unfolding, and I'll tell you why I see it unfolding it that way. It's very possible right now we're in the midst of deflation, which is really the most dangerous of all economic calamities, because in deflation, things get cheaper. So initially you think, oh boy, there's a lot of great deals out there. And that might be true if you're sitting on a lot of cash. Fine, there are a lot of great deals out there. I can now fill up my gas tank for $1.75 a gallon, and I can go across the country fairly cheaply. I can get for $89, I can fly to Las Vegas. These things all sound wonderful, except for deflation brings down the value and the demand for all things. So it doesn't just bring down the prices, it brings down the demand. So now that the demand for these things is going down and the price for these things are going down, it sets up for the worst outcome that can happen as a result of deflation, and that's hyperinflation. And I'm going to get to hyperinflation in a minute, but before I do, I want to tell you how I think this all plays in. I think that if we're going to look for what our October surprise could be this year, I think we need to look toward inflation and the Fed and what the Fed intends to do about it. The coronavirus is the biggest economic assault in world history at one time, not just on the United States, but on all nations. So really, it's a perfect setup. If you can get 30 million people on the unemployment rolls and keep them there as long as possible, which is why they don't want to open these states, these governors of these liberal governors of these states do not want to open. They don't want to open up. They don't want to open up because the longer and the deeper they can make this economic impact, the more government has to come to the rescue. What does that mean? That means the more government has to print up money. We've seen this already before this happened with the inverted yield curve. It doesn't make any sense. That means that long-term paper is cheaper than short-term paper. What that really means is that I'm getting paid less for a long-term investment than I am for a short-term investment. That is an anomaly that should never happen. And if it does, you know you're in for some serious trouble up the road ahead, right? So we'll use our Waze app and we'll look economically ahead up on the road. And what we may very well find is all of these things culminating together at the exact right time to take out Donald Trump. Now, don't get me wrong. The economic circumstance we find ourselves in, $30 trillion in debt with another $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities like pensions and Social Security, is not anything particularly new. This has been going on my entire life. What's different now are two things. Number one, we're operating at about 125% of GDP, our debt level. That's the highest it's ever been in the history of our country. Even during World War II, we were only around 100%. And we rectified that immediately after World War II. How did we rectify that? Sky-high interest rates and sky-high taxes. That was the only way to get it done. So worst case scenario, you know damn straight we're going to have to increase taxes and interest rates at some point. But here's how I see this unfold. Just the way the coronavirus came out of nowhere, took everyone by surprise and knocked them off their feet, restaurant businesses could never have imagined that they would go, to zero that quickly. That's what inflation can do to the economy in general. And particularly that's what inflation can do to home prices and the stock market. So if you're looking to buy a home, right now is a pretty good time, right? Lenders, you can get a mortgage for 2%, 2.25%, 2.5%, maybe 3% on the high end. You can get yourself a mortgage. And you don't really need any money down, which reeks of 2008 all over again, what happened to housing in 2008. If you were around back in 2008, you know exactly of which I speak. You know the pain that was inflicted in a very short period of time. I think that that's going to happen again, and the timing will be triggered just before the election, the re-election of Donald Trump. I think it's a great way to take a bunch of things that are already out there and are designed to cripple our economy and execute them at the right time to get rid of this guy, which is exactly what happened in 2008 financial crisis. If you recall, when Barack Obama was out there going to be elected against John McCain. The economy was humming pretty good. Everyone thought it was going really well. Despite the Iraq war having its ups and downs, we were in a place where the economy was doing very well. And then out of the clear blue sky, the economy, the sky was falling. It was the end of the world. That was it. We had to change capitalism as we knew it. Everyone was scrambling. George W. Bush himself even said capitalism is broke. Well, first off, capitalism was never broke. We never actually practiced it. If we ever actually practiced true capitalism, this country would be 100 times more successful than it already is. But that's besides the point. So this event happens. Lehman Brothers collapses. The dominoes start to fall. And isn't that handy? Right around September, boom, financial collapse. What does that mean? Barack Obama comes in to save the day, rescue it with socialism. He gets elected. John McCain falls away like the loser he is. And I see a very similar pattern playing out here. And I think this is the perfect setup to get rid of Donald Trump. I think it's a perfect way to hang the economy around his neck. And the truth is, we've been printing up money for too long. And at some point, as Reverend Wright famously said, Americans' chickens are coming home to roost. Well, it could be that Americans' economic chickens are coming home to roost, and it's conveniently timed for getting rid of a president that they really hate. And the best way to do that, as far as they're concerned, is to destroy the economy, hanging around his neck. So that's just, I hate to say it, especially since I love this country so much, I would hate to ever see anything negative happen to it, which is why it's so important to kind of war game these sorts of things. And because do you honestly think for a moment that the same people that went after Donald Trump before he was president and tried to destroy him and then initiated all of the shenanigans that you see with the Russian collusion and how they tried to take him out with that, and how they tried to take him out every step along the way, every single day for the last 4 years. Do you really think they're taking a vacation right now, that they're not out there plotting their next move? And so I contend that the coronavirus was move number one. Get everyone, stop business as we know it, seize it, get everyone stuck at home, shut down Main Street, make everyone clamor, make everyone beg for the government to do something. If you recall, that's what happened in 2008. Everyone was begging for the government to do something. The government had to step in. The free market was the reason why this happened. We had to trust the government at this point. Of course, that was totally untrue. It was 180 degrees the other way. But we find ourselves in the same place. So it's important to look past your everyday life and things that are happening as they are, and see that there might be something more sinister at play, that as much as you love your country is as much as other people don't really care much about it, especially since they've set themselves up a long time ago in such a way where regardless of what happens economically, they'll be just fine. Anyway, that is a brief message. I am Rusty Shackelford, your host of Radio Free America. No commercials today. Sorry, folks. We are working on some new sponsors. There's a handful of them out there that I think you're really going to enjoy their products. I'm excited about them, and I know a bunch of other people in the office here are as well. So have a great day, and I'll be in touch soon.